not who know who I am, I'm Arlindo da Silva. I married Joanna Joyner. Can you hear? Yeah. And so I've been Kehila now about 5 years, right? So it's my pleasure today to introduce a great friend of mine, Pinhas Alpert from Tel Aviv University. Pinhas is a professor in the Department of Atmospheric Science or Geophysics. He's the director of the Potter Institute for Environmental Sciences. He has been active in climate science, atmospheric science for many, many years. I met Pinhas more or less by accident. I was vacationing in Israel. That was in the early 90s, where my in-laws then used to live there. And my father-in-law had a tennis partner that said, "Oh, why don't you, your son-in-law's in there, why don't you come and with me to the university to meet a few folks?" And that was, Aviatar. So I went there, I met Pinhas. It turns out we had a connection through my advisor at MIT, someone was also, when he did a postdoc in Harvard. So, and then, I was teaching in Wisconsin at the time, and Pinhas came to visit me with his students, and it's been a long, long time collaboration. When I came to NASA Goddard in '96, Pinhas spent a sabbatical, with us. And he was able to remind me of a story that I had forgotten. At that time, they were discussing about the first Israeli astronaut in space. And it was a big debate. NASA actually wanted a scientist, and they wanted Pinhas to be the first, Israeli astronaut. The Israeli Air Force, of course, wanted a pilot, someone with a military credentials, and Ilan Hamoun ended up being the one. And it's a sad story that with the explosion of the Columbia, we lost him and many other astronauts. But Pinhas was possibly I was telling one of the things when they mentioned to him, he said, "Well, I may consider, but my wife may not want me to let me go." But anyway, so Pinhas is going to speak to us today about global warming. It's very appropriate for Tu B'Shavat and give his Jewish perspective on the subject. Pinhas, it's a pleasure to have you.
I wish to thank Joanna for the idea. I like to talk about this subject of the Jewish perspective on global warming. Normally I talk about it in Hebrew, on the TV, on the radio. So let me start with some personal statements. Perhaps it's important to say, because I was grown near Mea Shearim. I went to a cheder. I suspect most of you know what a cheder is. When I forgot something, I got hit on my fingers. Fortunately, my father, his idea was to go to a cheder till the age of 8. At the age of 8, he put me in a elementary school, and I loved science, and he pushed us very strong to learn. So this is how I reached where I am. And I want to dedicate this talk to a very good friend that I met in NASA over 30 years ago, Professor Al Arking. Perhaps some of you know him. He passed away last year, and he's perhaps the only person that I could talk about the Jewish perspective of global warming. And we talked about it for over 20 years. I hope that Vivian will be coming, but I don't see her here. She's not. Now, another thing that I want to say, Rabbi David talked about Tu B'Shvat. I want to tell you a personal feeling, very difficult for me to be away from my Moshav, Beit Gamliel in Israel. We used to put, I started about several years ago, to collect many, many fruits on Tu B'Shvat. And when we traveled away, because I had last week a meeting in Santa Fe on the climate, and this week in the University of Maryland, and Friday I was at Goddard. So the children say, and what is about the table of Tu B'Shvat? And they started to send us pictures of their tables, because my proud was to get to close to 50 types of fruits. And then ask the little children, what is this food? And what is this food? And what is the color inside? It was a big thing every Tu B'Shvat. And this year I am here. Okay. Let me start about the Jewish perspective of global warming. I will start few words about the climate of Jerusalem, which I published in the Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society 25 years ago on the uniqueness of Jerusalem climate. And Joanna asked me, she found on the internet, I want to talk about my uncle, who was like the mayor of North Jerusalem during the British mandate. So I will show you just 3 slides and then move to global warming and talk about Jewish perspectives, different ones. Particularly, as you can see here, I wish to talk about, in Judaism we say, we can correct, everything can be corrected. And we have the ozone hole as example, which is working, because the hole is starting to fill. There is a debate if it's 2050 or 2070. Perhaps Joanna knows much more about the ozone hole than myself, but I want to bring it as a Jewish example. We can correct. There is a story of Reb Shmuel Misalant, who was a chief rabbi in Yerushalayim in the 19th century, at the beginning of the 20th century. And he went with his students late at night, and they saw light in the, איך אומרים סנדלר? Shoemaker. There was light. And they came in, Reb Shmuel Misalant, and they asked him, what are you doing so late at night, correcting or repairing shoes? And the answer of the shoemaker was, as long as the light, the candle is on, we should do repair. And Reb Shmuel Misalant got himself excited so much about this word, he took all his students to the yeshiva, and he told them, you know what this shoemaker is teaching us? As long as the candle is burning, the candle is our neshama, our life. We are still able to repair, to correct. So this is, I will bring now the ozone instead of the shoemaker. But I think the ozone is a very nice example. Let me start with this paper, which I brought only several slides, the uniqueness of Jerusalem climate. And you can see the reference. Those who are interested in the full paper can find it in February 91. The uniqueness of Jerusalem climate. I will ask you a question before I show the next slide. Where is it raining more, in Jerusalem or in London? What do you say? This is the main question brought in this article. The amount of rainfall in Jerusalem is just about the same amount as in London. In London it's raining 594. I don't have somebody has some to show. Okay, I will show here. London has 594 millimeters per year. Jerusalem There are two stations. One is the airport, Atarot, 572 millimeters per year. Inside the town is a little less, 492. This is from the handbook of meteorology by Houghton, a sick handbook. But there is a large difference. The difference is in the sun hours. In Jerusalem, there are over 3,700 sun hours in a year. If you divide it by 365 days, you find 9.5 sun hours per day in Jerusalem. But what happens if you take this number in London, 1,500, and you divide it by 365, it's about 4 sun hours a day. Sun is so important to us. It's in the Bible. Shemesh tzedakah umarpeh bichnafeh. It's healing. You know, we had several days in Santa Fe now. It was no sun, and then the sun came out. I said, my wife, let's go and get a little bit of the sun. Okay, now, the idea that came to me was to combine these two important, very important climatic parameters, or climatic variables. The number of sun hours and the total amount of rainfall. There is no life without water. There is no life without the sun. Yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I was just thinking, what's the Negev rain? It must be completely different, right?
Right. Jerusalem is in the border of the desert. If you go 20 kilometers east to the Dead Sea or 30 kilometers to the east, it's an arid zone with 50 millimeters per year. The Negev, you ask about the Negev. The border of the desert is Beersheba, according to some definitions, 200 millimeters per year or 300 millimeters per year is the border. Now, the idea that came to me was the following. Let's combine these two parameters and see, is Jerusalem indeed unique? It is in the Bible, Yefei Nof Mesos Kol Haaretz, and it was explained by Rabbeinu Bachye at the 12th century that it is talking about Jerusalem. Yefei Nof Mesos Kol Haaretz, Har Zion, the Zion, the city of Zion. And it talks about the climate. And he says something very interesting. The word Nof, that is used in modern Hebrew for landscape, in the old literature in the Bible, it's climate. So this is the only word in the Bible which is referring to climate, according to Rabbeinu Bachye. Yefei Nof, it's a very nice climate. So I was looking to see, and I thought about it following Professor Ashbel, who talked about the large amount of sun in Jerusalem. So I combined the two and did such a figure that on this ordinate you see the annual sunshine in hours, and on this ordinate you have the annual amount of rainfall in millimeters. Now, some say 300, returning to your question, is the border of the desert. Some say 200, like in Beersheba. But if I take all the big cities in the world, 70 cities, you know, in Sukkot we talk about 70 nations. So you have all the big cities in the world. By the way, London is here, and Jerusalem is here, Jerusalem too, and they are on the same line, around 600 millimeters per year. Amazing, right? But you can see all the cities in Europe. Barcelona, Berlin, Paris, Kiev, Budapest, Moscow, Leningrad, they are all on the same line. And the other, as I say, is the amount of sun. And then I divided this scatter plot into 4 parts. I forgot to translate, but you will immediately what it means, what is each quarter saying. So we have a quarter here which has a lot of rainfall. The line, the critical line that I've chosen is 300 millimeters because of that. And the other line, which was arbitrarily chosen, is 3,250 hours of sunshine per year. And the only city which appears in this quarter, a lot of rainfall and a lot of sunshine, is the two stations of Jerusalem, Atarot and Generali building at the center of the city. And there are other quarters. This is the quarter which has many, many cities, which is a lot of rainfall and a lot and very little sunshine because there is a lot of clouds and a lot of rain. And there is a quarter which has very little number of stations, very dry and very little sunshine. And there is this quarter which are the deserts. Little sunshine, a lot of sunshine, and very little rainfall. So you have here Cairo, you have here Yuma, Phoenix, Tucson. Now, I was very happy to see that. Of course. Wow, it works. I have a paper to publish. But before sending it to the bulletin, I asked my student to go and put all the stations which are in the handbook. And this is what happened. It's the same picture, but a problem. A station here, the name Flagstaff, Arizona. Have you been there? Has somebody been there in Flagstaff, Arizona? So many. This is my first lecture that I have at least 10 hands saying, we were at Flagstaff. In Israel, nobody heard about this station. But for me, I was so upset. All my nice idea is broken because of this place that nobody has heard about, Flagstaff. It has a lot of sunshine and a lot of rainfall. And directly between the two cities of Jerusalem, between the two stations of Jerusalem. What do I do with that? I went into the handbook and looked carefully what kind of climate is Flagstaff. And then I found out that during most of the winter, or perhaps all of the winter, it's below zero. And for Israelis, it is clearly not a place to live there. Later, I met some American person on a plane, and he told me, yes, in summer it's wonderful there. Okay, but it didn't disturb me, and I sent it into the bulletin, and they accepted it right away. And it was chosen by the Christians in California, I told you, Arlindo, as one of the basic articles for Christianity. They quoted me. Okay, so it's not only the amount of sunshine, it's also the intensity. By the way, this I have drawn from NASA, and you can see the amount is 380 watts per meter square in July, which is very close to what you have in the middle of the Sahara. Here is Jerusalem. Very high numbers of sun insolation in summer, but also during the whole year, very high sunshine intensity. Now the other point which Joanna wanted me to mention, and I have two, three slides, is my uncle. I found his diary. He was the mayor of North Jerusalem. Jerusalem was divided into about 10 vicinities, and north of Jerusalem, including Beit Israel, Shmuel Hanavi, and Sheikh Jirach at that time, they're all places around Beit Israel, the old one and the new one, and it was the largest neighborhood in Jerusalem. Professor Yeshua Ben Aryeh, when he saw the book, he was so excited. I showed him the diary, and he helped us preparing this book. which is a very large book, and he only took parts of the diary, which was every day writing up. He was the MUCHTAR during 1938, from 1938 till 1950s. He continued even after the State of Israel was established. And he had many interesting correspondence with Moshe Dayan, with Ben Gurion, he was very active. One of the most interesting chapters, which was quoted many, many thousands of times, is about the first elections in Israel for the State of Israel. And he went like he looks like. He was a rabbi in Etz Chaim, the Cheder Etz Chaim, in which I learned. And he made Shehecheyanu before he put the ballot into the box. So it was read before the last election and before, even earlier, many, many times all over Israel. And it includes descriptions of the riots, the Arab riots, and many occurrences, the different scales, but his personal view of the thing. So we collected it and published it in Bar Ilan Press. There is the website here. You can find there many parts which were translated into English. Here is he sitting in during, it was a closure during the British Mandate time. Otzer. How do you say Otzer?
How do you say that? No, a curfew.
Curfew. During the curfew, these are the MUCHTARs of Jerusalem, and this is the brigadier who was in charge, and this is in 1947, and they are sitting here and discussing how to handle the city during these very difficult times. Very, very difficult times. And this is one example of a document. He issued thousands and thousands of documents because this was the mandate, like the mayor of all this neighborhood. This is a Teudat Leida, a certificate of birth for my father. He issued it he needed it in 1947. You can see that his stamp has 3 languages. On the right side is the Hebrew, Moshe Alpert, MUCHTAR, in Arabic and in English, MUCHTAR of the new and old Beit Israel quarters and the environment. So I have several thousands of these documents, and it is really amazing. Okay, let me leave that and go into global warming. I left, I think, few minutes talking about global warming, right? By the way, it's 150 years now to my great-grandparents arriving to Israel from Minsk, Slonim, Minsk, in 1867. And I discussed with my wife on the way how we collect all the thousands of people that came out from my great-grandfather. It is an issue that I don't know how to deal with, but my wife knows. This is okay. Okay, now every Jewish talk on global warming starts with this slide. Nearly everyone. In Hebrew, it appears here, but I got the translation. I hope it's a good translation. I like the Hebrew more, but let me call it. When the blessed Holy One created Adam, he took him and led him around all the trees of the Garden of Eden and said to him, look at my works, how beautiful and praiseworthy they are. And all that I have created, it was for you that I created it. Pay attention. In Hebrew, by the way, pay attention sounds not so good. Stand da'atcha. Put your mind. It's a little better than pay attention. But this is the translation that I got. pay attention that you do not corrupt and destroy my world. If you corrupt it, there is no one to repair it after you. Now, this appears in the Midrash Rabbah on the Megillah of Kohelet. And it is clear that since it was written, let's say 2,000 years ago, there was not such a situation that mankind has changed the climate of Earth. As Professor Paul Crutzen, who won the Nobel Prize on the ozone hole, and he became a good friend of our department, in 1996, I think it was, on finding the exact chemical way the ozone is destroyed. So Paul Crutzen called this period of time Anthropocene, which means the era that the first time that we have a period that is determined, the climate is determined by the man, anthropogenic, Anthropocene. So this looks very, very good that something written 2,000 years ago has referred to the global warming. But of course, I don't believe it. I don't think it's true. And I discussed it with several rabbis. Because the corruption or the pollution of the atmosphere in such a tremendous amount as we have today was impossible in the past. And I will show you several examples of that. Now, the greenhouse effect, I'm not sure I have to explain. It's perhaps 2 sentences. You know, the atmosphere is transparent to the incoming solar radiation, nearly transparent, but not so to the outgoing long-wave radiation, which is called the thermal infrared. So the greenhouse gases are the gases like carbon dioxide, methane, water vapor. They are absorbing some of the surface long-wave radiation. It's like a blanket and returning it back to Earth. So if this blanket, which is composed of greenhouse gases, is becoming more and more thick, we know it from bed. It's warmer, right? It becomes warmer. So this is the basic idea, and I will not go further into it. This is the hockey sticks, very famous, about the carbon dioxide going back 10,000 years. We see the jump in the recent post-industrial era, from 1850 normally. This is 10,000 years ago. And you can see the same thing happens with other greenhouse gases like the methane. And this hockey stick is showing it very clearly, the jump of all greenhouse gases in the time of the industrial evolution. And the consequence from the models we are running, climate models, is that we are going to have a warming. Till here it's measurements, and from here it's different IPCC estimate. The IPCC is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And you can see there is a low value. This is from 15 years ago, but it didn't change much even with the recent IPCC from 2013. I was then representing Israel at Shanghai at the meeting of the Working Group 1, which is on the sides of. So you can see the value didn't change a lot between 1 degree to 5 degrees warming to the end of the century, 2100. And we are still somewhere here with the best estimate of about 2.5 or so from pre-industrial period. The effect on Israel and the Mediterranean is very dramatic. And the Jewish perspective naturally is focusing over Israel. And you can see the dramatic reduction in rainfall between two periods, from 1930s to 1980s, and from 1980s to the 2000s. And these are all the shaded area is significant. This is from Columbia University, my friend Professor Yohanan Kushnir. You can see the very significant reductions all over the Mediterranean, including Israel. This is Israel. We can see a reduction which is of the order of 10%, 5 to 10%. And we did projections into the end of the century. These are our first regional climate modeling that show the reductions for two different scenarios. The bad scenario, in which people do nothing, human mankind do nothing, like Trump thinks now, okay? Or his aid, I don't know what is going to be, but you can see reductions of the order of 50 to 100 millimeters per year. And you know the number of millimeters per year in Jerusalem, it's about 570, let's say 600. 100 from 600 is about between around 15 to 18%, which is a lot. This is the worst scenario. It is comparing the end of the century 2070 to 2100 to a control period of 1960 to 1990. A little better scenario, now we have new scenarios which are more sophisticated. I will show perhaps some of them, but I don't want to go into it. It's not as bad, but this means, B2 means that people take action. People take action. Like in the last Paris Agreement, United States and China agreed. And then we came out with some agreement. What's going to happen to it, I don't know. You know better. You are closer to Washington, D.C., right? You may know better. Okay, let me say something. We can correct. After seeing this bad news, particularly for the Mediterranean, temperatures go very high. I will show some slide. And rainfall is going down. In the Mediterranean, it's considered as a hot spot. One of the world's hot spots that nearly all models, all 30 models or so, climate models agree. Mediterranean rainfall is going down. Now, we can correct the ozone hole example. The ozone recovery can be explained almost entirely by the reductions in the chlorofluorocarbons, this spray that we used to have 40, 50 years ago. Now, I represented Israel in Copenhagen, I think it was, when I was the head of the Porter School, and all people went very desperate that we didn't reach any agreement. And I was perhaps the only optimistic. I said, look what happened with the ozone hole. There were so many meetings till the treaty was fully accepted. Look all the places that they met for the ozone hole, the Montreal Protocol. The Montreal Protocol, to reach it, there were so many meetings. London in 1990, Nairobi 91, Copenhagen 92, Bangkok, Vienna, Montreal. It's very good for scientists, traveling a lot. Very nice. And we like it. Of course we like it, but I was not desperate. I say, wait. And indeed in Paris it was much better. I think so. What's going to happen now? Let's wait. Okay. The common belief is, and perhaps Joanna can correct me, that if the international agreement is adhered to, the ozone layer is expected to recover by 2050. I saw some estimation 2070. Okay. Now, why I don't think that the original Medrash that I brought from Kohelet is not really relevant to the global warming. It's nice, it's very nice. But nobody really knew about greenhouse gases till Fourier. I guess many of you who did some course in mathematics learned Fourier transform or Fourier series. It's interesting to know that Fourier was the first to conjecture the existence of greenhouse gases. There were no measurements in 1826 of greenhouse gases. But he was so clever, he did a calculation of the thermal balance of the atmosphere. And something didn't work out in his calculation. He said there must be some gases in the atmosphere. There were no upper air measurements at that time. We are talking close to 200 years ago. And he said there must be greenhouse gases. And the other guy who won a Nobel Prize later, not on this paper, is Svante Arrhenius in 1896. He published a paper in 1896, which is called On the Effect of CO2 in the Air on Surface Temperatures. It's amazing. Over 120 years ago. He won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1903. But in this paper, what he said was the following. People started to burn coal, to burn oil. Oil, I'm not sure, but coal, I'm quite sure. And he calculated the amount of carbon dioxide that is being emitted to the atmosphere. And he came with this article with a big message to the Scandinavian countries. You know, it's cold, it's too cold for you now. Don't worry, it's going to warm by 5 degrees Celsius. It's going to take 3,000 years. This is what he said in the article. Why? Because the burning of coal at that time was so little. He didn't imagine what's going to happen with the cars and with the electricity. He was thinking about burning of a little bit of coal in your the oven in your house. But it's in the firework and this fireplace. So,
Whatever.
but he was the one. He was the one who wrote the first article on that. Now, what people do not realize, even today, most of the people don't realize that, is the direct trash that we emit or we take out from our house. In Israel, it is perhaps in the United States, it's probably larger. It's 0.6 kilogram per day, and we calculate it's 0.22 ton per year per person. But the indirect greenhouse gases, which we do not see, it's pollution that we do not feel. We take the car and we drive 1 hour, and we burn several kilograms of. It's about 10 tons per year per person in Israel. Here it is closer to, I think, around 16 or 18 in the United States. I think also the number in Israel went up. It's now 12 or 14 tons per year per person. And this second kind of pollution is not in traditional sources. And this is the new period defined by Paul Crutzen as the Anthropocene. Just to imagine the anthropogenic carbon dioxide sources are about 150 times the natural volcanic source, which is very large. But what we burn with our cars, with our electricity, is much higher, and the natural balance is not conserved. Now, I want to bring you some interesting Jewish perspective into the carbon. The life is based on carbon in a very large amount. The most notable groups of chemicals used in the processes of living organisms are based on carbons. There is a whole list here: proteins, enzymes, carbohydrates, fats. All of these, carbon is a central component. In fact, there are millions of molecules and of components of the carbon. But there are only two which are pure forms of carbon. It is what I quote from Tim Flannery book, The Weather Makers, that I was asked to write the introduction to in the Hebrew version. And he says the following: both diamonds and soot are pure forms of carbon. The only difference being how the atoms are arranged. Carbon is a lot on the planet of Earth. It is constantly shifting in and out from our bodies, as well as from rocks to sea, to soil, to the atmosphere, and back again. So there is a lot of exchanges. This carbon plays such an important role in our life. But there are only two types of carbon from the millions of molecules that are totally pure. He doesn't write about it, but I was thinking, this reminded me some Jewish thinking by a rabbi. This is in Hebrew. The rabbi is called Rabbi Simche Bunim, from a place called Shisra in Eastern Europe. He was a clever rabbi. And he said the following: every Jewish person should have in his two pockets 2 pieces of paper written the following. In the one pocket, I embed dust and ashes, which Abraham said, V'anochi afar va'efer. And the other ticket, in the other pocket, the world was created for my sake. Bishvili nivra ha'olam. Why have these 2 tickets in his 2 pockets? The idea is one pocket which contains, these are the origins in the Gemara, in Sanhedrin and in Chulin, for the 2, what does it mean for the Jewish thought, these 2 sayings. But very simply said, it's the following: when you feel too high and too good, take the ticket which says, Anochi afar va'efer. We are just dust and ashes. But when you are in a despair, in a big despair, despair, and you feel so bad, take the other ticket. The world was created for me. And when we take the 2 sides of the carbon, it fits so nicely. Diamonds. I always say, what is the best thing that you can bring to your wife? I bought once. It helped. 45 years. I must be careful now when I'm talking about bringing your wife a diamond. And the other thing is, the other tail of what we think about is the soot. Graffiti is carbon that is dirty. You want to clean it. You want to get away from it. But this carbon that covers the whole spectrum of life, going from the soot to be cleaned, and from the diamond so well, this carbon is responsible, it appears in the methane, in the carbon dioxide, and is so central in our life. This is in Hebrew. Okay. Let me go to another thing now, to policy. In Copenhagen, I was approached by this group, the Jewish Climate Change Campaign. They asked me to provide, there were several meetings before going to Copenhagen. It's called the Alliance of Religions and Conservation. It includes Buddhists, Christians, Muslims. They all went together in the street in Copenhagen. It was amazing, an amazing scene to see the rabbis with the beards and with the hats, and the sheikhs, the Muslim leaders, and the Christian with all their garment. It was amazing to see it. And they all came together to help the climate change campaign. And I'll bring now the Jewish, there are websites that you can see here, but let me bring one of the slides I was provided by this group. Jewish practices and traditions which are related to the environment. There are practices, like they divide it into two groups, central practices and traditions that relate directly to the natural world. Tu B'Shvat must be here somewhere. Yes, number 4. Okay. Tu B'Shvat is here, of course. But in the central practices, the Shabbat, the Kashrut, the Brachot is a kind of appreciation to nature that we got, to God, to nature, that we got this food. We bless. The Kriyat Shema, the Halacha, the Mitzvot, the holiday sign, and the different traditions which are directly related to nature. Shemitah, Bal Tashchit, do not destroy. There is an interesting discussion in the Talmud. You have a plate and you feel that you are like full. You don't want to eat more. But you feel so bad about throwing this into the garbage. And you don't know what to do. Bal Tashchit means do not destroy. Do not destroy the food. On the other hand, you feel it's not good for you. You are full. So the Gemara says, Bal Tashchit de Gufa Adif, which means destroying your body is stronger. And that means don't eat it. You feel that you are satisfied, don't eat more. I shouldn't say that. I hope the organizers are not about me now going to eating the Seder. Seder is okay because it's all fruits, and don't take it too seriously, okay? Okay, Bal Tashchit, pollution. There's a lot of discussion of pollution in the Talmud, particularly in the tractate of Baba Batra. Tu B'Shvat, Yovel. We talked about Shemitah. You let the earth rest for a full year, which is something amazing. Shiluach HaKen. That means you see you find the birds with the mother. You are not allowed to take the mother and the little chicken. You must let the mother go. לא תיקח האם על הבנים, שלח תשלח את האם ואת הבנים תיקח לך. You can take the chicken, the eggs, after you send the mother away. שילוח הקן, keeping the nature. And צער בעלי חיים. I can talk about it for the whole day, but I have to finish I promised Joanna, when? 11:30? Okay, so let's go a little bit. They have some resolutions which perhaps I will skip now. And I want to give another look, another Jewish perspective into global warming. Here sits Arlindo. I was working with him, and now he works a lot on dust and particles in the atmosphere. You know, we are surrounded by very large amounts of aerosols. In each cubic centimeter, there are hundreds of particles, very small, micron, 1 million of a meter, or 1,000th of a millimeter. And the dust, the aerosols, are related very strongly to global warming. It's a big debate how it's going to affect. And what we have shown in Israel, and this is a Jewish thought that I wanted to bring you from the Bible. I think I never talked with you about it. I'm not sure, but this is something I wish to write down and publish sometime. So don't spread this message, please. We published a few years ago in a paper that in Tel Aviv there is a significant increase in African dust. The dust in Tel Aviv comes from the Sahara, mostly. And the same time, rain went down. Now, there is a very strong relation between rain and dust, rain and aerosols. There is no rain without particles. Small particles are requested for generating a drop. You need what is called nuclei. So, rain cannot come without the dust. But when the rain comes, it cleans the air from dust. So there is a very interesting relationship that I'm now studying. And in the Eastern Mediterranean and Israel particular, rain goes down in the last 50 years, as I will show in a moment, and dust is going up. And we can find it in the Bible. In the Bible. In the book, in the 5th book of Moses, it says that God will exchange, this is the klala, the curse, that God will exchange, if you do not behave right, God will exchange the land rainfall into dust. In Hebrew, iten Hashem et metar artzecha avak ve'afar. So the rain, instead of rain, you will have more dust. We do see it in the trends. The rain is going down in the last 50 years, as I will show in a moment the scientific results, and dust is going up. By the way, the Columbia flight that Arlindo mentioned earlier, I was involved in this project. The main project of Ilan Ramon, Zal, Zichrono Livracha, was to follow the dust plumes. I talked with Ilan Ramon several times. I was on the group. My group responsibility was to provide Ilan Ramon and the other astronauts the location of the dust plume. This is a satellite picture from MODIS, which showed the dust plume, the last dust plume that Ilan Ramon took the picture of. And it was provided 24 or 36 hours before by our forecast that it's going to be over the Eastern Mediterranean. And at the same time, we had also aeroplanes going into the dust plume by Professor Zev Levin. So we had Ilan Ramon looking from above into the dust plume from the satellite, planes going on different levels from Cyprus. Cyprus is somewhere here. They took measurements, and this is one of the papers that was in which we published the system of prediction that we used satellites, NASA satellite, TOMS. At that time there was no MODIS available yet, or perhaps it was just at the beginning, and we were the first to use TOMS initialization. Are you familiar with this paper, Arlindo?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
You are? Okay. So this was the first time we assimilated in a very simple way Tom's measurements, which are an instrument looking for the ozone. Total ozone measuring spectrometer is the initials of Tom's. And we took these measurements that were taken at around, they arrived to us at about afternoon, and then we introduced them into the model, and we did the data simulation and ran a regional dust model. And we provided him with this with a similar picture of where, so he can prepare, and took the pictures. This is how it looks like, dust in Tel Aviv. And this is what I mentioned before, is the increase in Tel Aviv. This is the time from 1962 to the 2000. You have here annual values, and we have also a straight line, or a five-year smoothing is the red. This is blue, Rochale. Okay, the blue is the annual dusty days, and you can see that the average value in the 1960s was about 15 dusty days in Tel Aviv per year. 15, 1-5. And in the 2000s, we reached something of the order of 25. So there is a debate how good are these, but it was, I'm convinced that it was true, and the dust is going up, and related to that, rain is going down. And this we published 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, in 2013. We looked into different locations in Israel, and you can see places where the reductions are relatively high, close to 3 point, this is per decade. And this is from 1975 to 2010. When you multiply it by 3.5 decades, you get something of the order of 10 to 15% reduction in Tel Aviv area. What is even worse is in the north, the Kinneret, okay, and the mountains of the Galilee, and the Ramat HaGolan, the Golanites.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Is there any correlation between bombing, so, you know, the Iraq, intensive bombing and dust?
Yes.
Can you do that kind of specific correlation? Because I've always thought that the global circulation would reflect the unending war and the, you know.
Yeah, there is an anthropogenic effect of the bombing, and we relate to it in one of our papers. If you wish, you can enter my website. The paper is a PhD student of mine, now Barkan and et al. And Alpert. I think it was published. We discussed the different 11 or 12 sources of dust over the Sahara and over the Saudi Arabia deserts. And we find a peak which is related to the Gulf War. And we clearly associate that with the Gulf War. So it's in the paper.
Is it in English or Hebrew?
No, it's English. You know, Hebrew articles are not considered for your promotion, anything.
Okay.
It needs to be in English, only in English. Perhaps we published it also in Hebrew, but yes.
When you start, could you briefly explain something I've never understood, the distinction between fluorocut and aerosol spray? You said that the impact has greatly benefited the cloud cover of the ozone layer from the suppression of the one, but the aerosol is still permitted and causing great damage. I've never understood the distinction.
Yeah, ozone, we are talking on 2 different layers. One layer is close to the ground, which is called the bed ozone. because it's caused by chemicals and the interaction, the solar interaction, and these are not good for our health. The higher level of ozone, which is at about 20-25 kilometers, is called the good ozone. So we have the good ozone layer and the bad ozone layer. Regarding aerosols, the situation is different. We are talking about aerosols in the lower atmosphere, which is up to few kilometers. The relation between greenhouse gases and ozone is also a greenhouse gas, but its amount is relatively little. There are some people who think that this is the main component. In the meeting that we had in the Santa Fe last meeting, somebody wrote a book saying that the ozone is responsible for the war. But the common wisdom, and I think Joanna and Arlindo will agree with me, that the effect of ozone as a greenhouse gas is very small. It's only in the ultraviolet. The effect is mostly in the ultraviolet. Perhaps I answered your question? I'm not sure. Okay. Let me finish with, okay, so I mentioned that, and perhaps I will finish with this. This very beautiful Pirkei the Rabbi Eliezer. When people cut down the wood of the tree, this is for Tu B'Shvat, of course, which yields fruit. The cry of the tree cries. Its cry goes from one end of the world to the other, and the voice is inaudible. In Hebrew, for me, it sounds much better. Let me say it also in Hebrew. כשנכרת עץ פרי, יוצא קול זעקה, מקצה הארץ עד קצה, אך אינו נשמע. It's not, we don't hear this cry, which goes all over the world. Now, why is this related to global warming? It's very, very clear. Because when we cut the tree, we cause the carbon dioxide that should be sequestrated is going. By the way, it's also related to dust, which I didn't mention, but I don't have more time. The other thing about why people worked for the. Okay, and the last, perhaps the last, before I say thank you, regarding global warming, is a sentence said by Sir John Houghton, who was the chair of the IPCC for 15 years or so. Nobody made a greater mistake than he, who did nothing because he could only do a little. And really we can do only little. But when you combine all the little things together, it is much. And the Hebrew version for this saying by Edmund Burke from the 19th century is what Rabbi Tarfon says. לא עליך המלאכה לגמור ולא אתה בן חורין להיבטל ממנה. In English, it is not incumbent upon you to complete the work, but neither are you at liberty to desist from it. תודה רבה. Thank you.
Time for a little-